time now to have another dip into the morning's newspapers. Here with me reviewing them this morning are National World Cities Editor-in-Chief Nancy Fielder and Senior Reporter for The Eye, Benjamin Butterworth. So welcome back to both of you. And Ben, you're going to kick us off this time round with an article in your paper, in The Eye, about a Tory MP and vaping.
Yeah, well, this is another scandal involving lobbying and questions over whether it was properly declared. So Adam Afriyie, who is the Conservative MP for Windsor and has been since 2005, is a vice chair of a parliamentary group on vaping. He's lobbied quite heavily for the government's anti-smoking strategy to encourage people to vape, which is known to be far less dangerous compared to cigarettes. But what he didn't declare, it turns out, in this scoop in the Eye newspaper, is that his wife has shares in a vaping firm. And this comes after just a couple of years ago, he had shares in a cannabis firm. He apologised and declared that on the record. And now it turns out his wife had shares in the same company. And so it raises quite serious questions about this relationship between business, between big money, and what politicians are doing in Parliament.
OK, and because he's not here to explain himself, there is a statement, isn't there, that the newspaper does publish, so I am going to read that out. He's told the newspaper the UK's progress in harm reduction is fantastic, and as a vice chair of the Committee on Vaping, I'm always pleased to accept speaking invitations to share our success story worldwide. He talks about personally quitting through vaping 15 years ago, so personal experience. I'm just going to carry on just so to give him his say. Has spoken on the subject in Parliament since 2016 and will continue to encourage the uptake of smoking alternatives. Indeed, friends will tell you I'm a bit of a bore on the subject. And he said, as the Khan Review noted, almost 6 million people still smoke in England, and smoking remains the single biggest cause of preventable illness and death. My crusade is to ensure that legislation is evidence-based and led by science.
And interestingly, he doesn't actually acknowledge the question of why his wife's shares weren't declared. And what I was going to say is I find it quite interesting is that is basically a lobbying for the cause again. Now, I actually think it's a perfectly valid question. The UK is out of sync with much of the rest of Europe. We encourage vaping to give up smoking. I think that makes a lot of sense as well. But the question is this another Tory MP not being honest about money going into their household and what they're doing in parliamentary hours?
Yeah, and interesting to see whether we see more from him on precisely that question. In the meantime, though, Nancy, let's take us over to the Times now. And the front page story here focuses on Sir James Dyson having a bit of a swipe at the Prime Minister.
That's right, absolutely. A really big kick, to be honest, at the Prime Minister. So Rishi Sunak has said that he's going to invest lots and really develop and make sure that we are the home and the sort of throbbing heart of science and technology. And Dyson saying this is nothing more than spin, there's nothing behind it. And actually the opposite is true. He's saying that companies have been put off from investing, that the ones sort of with the big plans and the big digital ideas are not going to come here, they're going to go elsewhere in the world. And he's not the only person saying it. It comes on the back of some really, really big tech companies saying exactly the same, including names as big as Microsoft. So there is a serious problem here. Obviously, it's something the Prime Minister wants to portray as being part of his plans for the future and development and investment and jobs growth. And actually, those in the field are saying that the opposite is true. And this is the reason this is such a massive problem is because technology and science move so quickly. And these big bosses are saying that within 5 years, this opportunity is gone. Other people will have invested elsewhere. So unless the Prime Minister turns this around now, we've got a really, really serious problem coming out.
Yeah, and I guess Rishi Sunak will point to the fact that he's created this separate department for science, innovation and technology, and that we will see results in future. I imagine that's what they would say to that. Let's turn to the Star, Ben. We did tease everybody about this in the last hour and say we would talk about it. Typical playful front page, but there's quite a serious message behind it, isn't there?
There is. So the Pope has encouraged Italians to have more kids, basically. And the point he makes, he says that it's selfish to have a low birth rate. And I looked this up and was quite amazed that Italy's birth rate is 1.26. Now, in order to maintain a stable population from the native population, you'd need about 2.1 1.1. So this is really much lower. The UK is about 1.5. It's expected to fall to 1.4. And so, I think the Pope is making a really important point here, that we have a big problem in Western, wealthier countries, that people just aren't having enough kids, and that's causing serious demographic problems. In the UK, we have more people over the age of 65 than we have under 16. We see it in the NHS, we see it in the pensions bills. And so I think, I'm not a Catholic, I'm not a Christian at all, I'm not religious, but I think the Pope makes a really good point. And the truth is he doesn't offer the solutions that we really need, which is people to be able to afford housing, people to have the kind of salaries that mean they can support a child and feel they can plan for families. But those would be the ways to try and get what the Pope wants.
Well, yeah, it's interesting though, Nancy, isn't it? Because on the one hand, obviously there is this issue of who's going to pay for everyone's pensions if you haven't got enough young people. But at the same time, you talk about housing. Is that a strain, if you have too big a population, is that a strain on resources? But also a strain on the planet as well. There are lots of different arguments at play here.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I'm not sure that what the world needs is the human race to keep growing and booming in the way that it has. I mean, the problem is, as you've said, to break the cycle, you've got to get through the period that is coming where you've got lots of elderly people who need extra investment in healthcare. We've got a social system that isn't great for looking after old people. So it is, but the cycle's got to be broken. Do we actually really need the populations to keep growing massively? I don't think, well, we might think we do, but I don't think the planet does. So, yeah, I mean, it might be a particular problem in Italy. And there are other areas in the world, but particularly in Europe, actually, in Scandinavian places where they've done huge things to try and get people to stay in their countries and to reproduce more, but there are other parts of the world where the population is shooting up, so it's a balance. But yeah, more humans is not what any other species on the planet wants.
We've only got 30 seconds, Nancy, but a very quick look, talking of nature and the planet, a quick look at the article in The Guardian that you want to talk about foraging.
So this is all about the very trendy foraging where you go out and pick nettles and wild garlic, but actually there are now people doing it on a commercial scale, going to sort of protected sites and stripping huge armfuls and selling them on. So it's saying do forage, do enjoy what is there for free, but actually don't take the mickey and don't destroy things, because there are some plants that may be wiped out forever.
Okay, don't go mad with your foraging is the message this morning that we're going to leave everyone with. Nancy and Ben, lovely to have your company this morning. Thanks very much indeed.